to the TasFarmers Talks podcast. My name's Grayson Genders. I'm I'm in charge of communications and membership engagement. It's been another big fortnight in ag. This week we're going to talk about a few things. Hot off the press is milk prices, as well as deer management as the Minister makes announcements. And Rushy Lagoon drags on for probably about the fourth time. FIRB has now extended their decision-making process. But underneath all of these things is sort of the same questions. Are we creating the conditions for agricultural growth and for the industry to thrive, or are we just putting more barriers in the way? We're going to unpack it. We're going to unpack what lower milk prices could mean for investment on dairy farms. Whether the latest deer reforms go far enough. We'll check that out with the President, Mr. Nathan Cox, and we'll talk about what the community thought of the Rushy idea. But first, I'd like to go around the table and introduce our guest today, Michelle Lawrence, dairy farmer from the Meander Valley. Welcome to
Thank you.
The podcast. It's great to have you here. You're originally a Victorian.
Yes, I was born in Victoria and moved here when I was 10.
When you were 10, and you've married into a local farm family?
Yes, I think the joke is that I saved our kids from two heads.
Oh, geez, 6 generations farm family, so you may have done. But you've been here for quite a number of years, as you said, so you probably are now officially Tasmanian.
I think I'm officially Tasmanian and officially a farmer because I've spent more of my life on the farm, working within the farm.
But you were also a teacher prior for how long?
Probably 20 years, but not always full-time because within that we had our children, so yeah, part-time for part of that.
And that was in the early childhood years?
Yes.
You probably deserve a medal. And your involvement with TasFarmers, Jeff Cox got you involved in it?
Yeah, about 2018 I think it was that I met Jeff, and he asked me to join Dairy Council, and I guess at that stage I really felt that so many decisions happen outside our farm that we can't control, but they impact how we actually farm. So to be involved in those conversations and to sit around those tables was incredibly important to me. Just gives you a bit more agency in what you do. Definitely, and there's probably more to dig into what advocacy can really mean for dairy and the broader community. Nathan Cox, the President.
Thanks, Grayson.
Farmer from the northeast. Is it raining?
Northwest,
sorry. I'm just so excited about Rushy. What's happening on the northwest?
Still raining.
Still raining?
I think we've had about 48 hours of solid rain, so the rain we were looking for in the summer has shown up.
Is it going to cause the grass to grow, or we need a bit more?
Oh, if the soil temperature stays up, we'll get a lot of growth out of this.
And, excitingly, we have one of our policy team members, the guy who looks after one of our big projects with seaweed, Jonathan. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Grayson. Happy to be here.
Jonathan, you're a South Australian you're from WA originally, and moved to Tasmania recently. Now hold the role of, what's the role here today? Project manager,
policy officer / project lead. Yeah,
big job.
Working mainly in the dairy space, and between our policy team, Sarah, Jasmine, and I, we do a pretty solid job working with farmers and trying to find ways that we can give back, and with the project, looking at some low emissions work there using seafeed. And so dairy prices is a familiar topic for you? It is, and it's something that we've been talking about the last few days, isn't that right, Michelle? So I think there's a fair bit of room, or a fair bit of discussion in this room, I think, today that's going to surround that, and we'll just keep going on. Well, that's probably a pretty good segue into what some might call the margin squeeze, which is the opening milk prices for 2026-27. The season's beginning. For many, the outlook is a little bit concerning. While some processors have held prices up, others have reduced their opening prices, which is interesting at a time when labour prices are going up. And today, Nathan, the Fair Work have increased the average wage for low-income earners. Well, that was yesterday.
Yep. So I'm not really cross numbers, but Michelle, you said minimum wage went up 6%.
I think, the lowest wage is about 6% and overall about 4.75%.
Yep.
And fertiliser costs, we've got energy costs amongst this mix, we've got the cost of financing, insurance, compliance costs. So, several processors have announced those prices and some below last season's levels. Michelle, can you paint the picture just broadly first, what's happening in dairy?
So our current season is winding down. That's the natural cycle of the weather that influences our seasonal pasture-based system. So we started off with a fairly dry spring that impacted pasture growth, and whilst our cows were still fully fed, it did impact the quality of the feed that we were able to give them, which in turn has an impact on milk production. We're on a farm where we have a lot of irrigation and dry land, and we also have dry land, but being able to irrigate our pasture in a pasture-based system meant we were still able to produce the grass that we needed to feed our cows. And then going into autumn, we've had a really warm autumn, and that has meant our pasture has actually kept on growing, and that's been a really good thing for us. Recently, despite a fairly dry season, we've had 30 millimetres of rain in the last few days. So what we're looking at now is recharging our water systems, our soil profile, and setting ourselves up for the next season. So at the moment, our season's looking pretty good the way it's ending. Pasture in the paddocks, water in the system, setting us up for next year.
Well, let's just talk briefly then on we've talked about some of the pressures, but the opening prices, you've got to pay the bills. What's it looking like?
Yeah, so the opening price was due out on Monday, so June 1st by 2 p.m, and this is probably the first year where we've seen a lot of processors come out at the last minute. So I think last week there was a fair bit of angst in the community about what was happening and why it was so late. I do think it has been a really complex year for processors to be able to make that decision though. We're looking at for the first time, we're with Lactalis Mainland Dairy, so previously Fonterra. Probably for the first time we've seen a range of prices rather than a set weighted milk price, and that's caused confusion for some people. But I also think it's a chance to talk about the fact that not every farmer is paid equally. There are a range of ways we're paid. Many of the farmers I've spoken to, they've had their income estimate, and that means they're going to get a price of $8.80, but we've also heard of farmers who might be getting a price of around $8.60. So there's a fair bit of difference in that. We actually did ask, who's getting the $9.45? Apparently that's some select people on the mainland, so we're not sure what we would have to do to actually get that higher price. But yeah, so there's a little bit of uncertainty in there. We're actually getting our income estimates in, starting to do budgets and comparing to what last year was. So we're about 5% down on what we were paid last year at the moment. So being that opening prices is offering a little bit conservative, we are hoping that we'll see some step-ups and some changes within that to give us more confidence over the season.
Jono, are they the numbers you're hearing broadly across the rest of the dairy industry?
Yeah, it's been an interesting few days, hasn't it, Michelle? And I think just the way that the incentives are set up this year has created a bit of confusion, and we had a bit of a discussion yesterday with a couple of our dairy committee just around how they shape them, and I think that's probably why there's those price ranges rather than a set price. So from a farming point of view, and you're looking at that, there's just a level of confusion and people are reporting things differently. The Weekly Times put out a price that you would expect to be the base price, but it was the top price for Mondelez, and it just creates a little bit of confusion and complexity. So
I think that's a good thing to touch on then. Can you tell us what makes up that pricing, Michelle?
So I guess I don't know every single processor, but generally speaking, you'll see that there's a volume incentive. So depending on how much volume that you produce, that can have an impact on your base milk price. Now, it's not about one farm producing more milk. So we can have a farm, we're milking 1,200 cows. There could be a farm that's smaller than ours, but they're part of a larger business group. And so therefore it's the whole volume of that whole group that will give all of the farms in that business group a higher milk price. And then you have added to our payments, I guess, we have milk quality bonuses based around the quality of the milk that we produce. Some people will have
protein and
no, we'll get paid fat on protein, so the components of our milk. So if you're a farm that has, we run about a fat protein ratio of 5 and 4, so that's what sets our base milk price as well. And then you'll have things like loyalty incentives. So if you've got a 2-year milk contract, you might have a little bit of bit extra on top of that. So there are so many ways that is that milk price is made up.
And am I right to say that some processors have introduced a levy on fuel to help the situation?
I haven't heard anything.
No?
We do have a supplementary or a voluntary payment to support with the prices at the moment. That came into effect, I think it was May 1, and I think for us it's going through until the end of September. When you think about the impact of that on our business, a lot of the really high prices came early. So that came in, that started May, and prices had started softening a little bit. But it's this time of year, this isn't our peak area, part of the season. So there's not as much milk in the system for that voluntary payment at the moment, but it's still been very, very welcomed.
So with some farms are receiving a lower price. What are the additional pressures from fuel and fertiliser placing on farm businesses?
I guess it's not just fuel and fertiliser, it's the cumulative impact of everything. So we've had 2 interest rate rises this year. Now I looked at dairy benchmarking, and dairy benchmarking tells me that the average farmer pays $1.10 per kilogram of milk solids interest, for their finance costs per year. That's gone up with 2 interest rate rises, so that's going to be an impact over the next season.
So financing.
And labour, ongoing shortage of skilled labour, rising wages, the skill level of people. When you're bringing in people and you're training them, they're not as productive as your experienced workers, so that has an impact. Fertiliser is one of our largest operating costs. We need fertiliser. We cannot do without fertiliser. When we're producing milk, we've got cows in a paddock eating grass, taking nutrients out of the system. We have to replace those somehow. Now, depending on where you farm, depending on your the type of soil you have, depending on the natural fertility of your area, that would change what you do. We cannot do without it. It's a really important part of our system, and some people are reporting up to $1,000 more for their fertiliser. Now, if you take that out, if you say, I can't afford it, you're not just impacting your pasture growth and then your production for the next year. It could be years to come, but that your land is affected. So, there's a big impact to your business long term. There's also a food security impact there, because we need to produce milk. We need to produce food to feed a nation and to feed a world. Power, increasing costs around electricity costs. We've got dairies often in our farms. On our farms we have solar power. Sorry, you're smiling at me.
No, I'm just trying to figure out which one is giving you the biggest headache.
They all are. It's the it's the cumulative effect of all of them. But I guess wages and fertiliser and they're 2 of our biggest costs. Yeah.
So, Michelle, given the drop in milk price and the increase in just about everything,
yep.
Just as a rough number, I mean, I know you're all over your budgets. What sort of, and you're obviously doing forecasting for the next season, what sort of net impact do you think the drop in milk price and the increase in all your costs is going to have generally across the industry?
So I'm not going to talk about our personal business, but I will talk generally about, I did have a look at dairy-based benchmarking, and while there's a small number of people in that system, it still gives us a snapshot of what's happening in the industry. So the average farmer last year, their cost of production was $7.22. We know our costs are increasing by about 25 to 30%, right? Do the maths, it's over $9 cost of production. That's knowing what's in the system now. I think the great unknown is spring. We know that our costs are being impacted by fuel and fert at the moment, but other things that we're buying with freight costs, so all the rubberware for our dairy, all the piping for our irrigation, right? If we need to buy them, they're in the system now. Come spring, when all of that's been purchased and the new product that's in the manufacturing line at the moment is being processed with higher prices going in, what is going to be the cost of that product to us? It might be more than 25 to 30%. You know what I'm saying?
And
so if we go back to that average farmer with a cost of $7.22, and we're already saying we think our costs are going to be up 25 to 30%, over $9, we know that the average financing cost is $1.10. Do the maths. No one can say, and that's going to be a really good thing.
no. And the other one to watch will be agronomy, chemicals.
Yep.
The words on the street, that's going to get more expensive as well. So just
anything
all
that
adds
has
up.
plastics is going to get more expensive because plastics have oil.
Yeah,
Everything's
petroleum
impacted.
related.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you had to step into the boots of a processor, what might be driving this decision, do you think?
I think processors are really in a difficult situation where they're managing the expectations of their shareholders. They're managing rising costs with their own businesses, and they're also managing knowing that if they don't pay their farmers enough, that's going to impact their milk supply. So I actually am glad I'm not part of that decision making.
So general question, and we see this with every commodity that comes off a farm. Farm gate prices are not keeping pace with costs and all of that. How long? And I mean, this is a rhetorical question. How long do you think it is before some of those costs need to be passed on to the consumer in the supermarket? Because we can't keep absorbing them.
And the consumer will say, how can I absorb those costs? We are in a really difficult situation, and where is the light at the end of the tunnel? I think what we need the consumer to think is we need them to shop deliberately. We know that milk is a really nutritionally dense product. We know that it forms part of the diet for the majority of Australians. So by shopping deliberately, when they go to the supermarket, they don't need to shop expensively because no one can afford that at the moment. But if the consumer can go to the supermarket and say, I am going to buy an Australian branded product today, I might buy less than usual, but I'm going to buy Australian. I'm not going to choose the cheap import over there. That is what's going to make a material difference to us.
Yep. So from a dairy farmer's perspective, cheap imported products include product categories such as cheeses, butters.
Have a look at the label.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, takes a second to check the label.
You've been quite generous to the processors, but do you think that farmers are carrying too much of the risk?
Farmers always carry risk. That's the nature of the beast. And we know that agribusiness in Australia is one of the most volatile businesses, whether it be, global instability, whether it be climatic conditions. There are so many things that impact risk in our business, input costs, global dairy price. What I think farmers would like transparency on is our milk price is mainly influenced by global dairy trade. But on farm, we know and we are really, really proud of the products that our milk produces. So we're mainly manufacturing milk in Tasmania, but we know that we produce Duck River butter, which is sold domestically. That's not part of global dairy trade. We know that we produce a really high-value cheese that goes into Japanese markets. We know that some factories produce flavoured milks, yogurts, those really high-value products. So I think what would be really good to see is greater transparency on how those products are valued in our opening milk price, not just understanding the impact of global dairy trade.
You've talked a little bit about the investment you're going to be making on farm. If you want to do that, but you need to be sustainable in terms of with an appropriate milk price, what's your future decisions going to be around investment? Tassie Dairy has been one of the growth stories in Australian dairy. Is it going to slow down?
If there's no fat in the system to make investment, you can't grow. That's just the maths. But I think, ask your question again. Are you
going to keep on investing with these sorts of numbers, or do you just wind right back?
I think every dairy business is in a different cycle of their business, and so it will be different for everybody. We still have confidence in what we're doing, and we still think that this is a phase. Hopefully this is just a cycle that we will pass through. But we are seeing the cumulative effects of costs increasing, and it's not keeping pace with what we're getting paid for our milk. So it does impact your mental load on a daily basis is more about cost management than growth. The other thing is we've got wonderful sustainability targets and commitments in our industry, but you actually need to be able to pay to put those into place. So I guess it puts into question what we're going to be able to do, and maybe is the price for our milk really valuing the things that are really important in our industry, such as sustainability?
Well, from one issue affecting farm profitability to another that's affecting productivity. If dairy farmers are trying to grow more grass and produce more milk, they're not doing that for the deer. The Minister and the Tasmanian government have announced significant reforms to deer management. It's a very hot topic. The changes include a simpler permit system, year-round control of male and female deer under a single permit, removal of bag limits and tagging requirements in Zone 2 and 3, and expanded access for recreational hunters. Sounds like a win-win. TasFarmers has welcomed many of the changes, but some say perhaps we could go further. Nathan, for farmers who haven't followed every detail of the debate, what's actually changed this week?
From our perspective, overall, the changes that the minister made to the deer management process has been a win. There's much more opportunity opened up for farmers to do more to control deer on their properties, and there's also more opportunities for hunters, particularly for those that want to go out and shoot to put go out and hunt to put meat in the freezer. And so we think it's a step forward. It's definitely the right direction. We think there's still some tweaks to be made, but the minister is opening up consultation on this, which means we'll get more, that the entire community will get more say on continuing this direction that he started out on.
What would you say is the most significant reform in the announcement?
The reduction of permits, simplification of permits. Farmers are just bogged down in red tape, and to manage something as straightforward as effectively an introduced species, the permit system was overly complicated, and there's historical reasons why it was overcomplicated. But as far as farmers are concerned, it needed to be simplified so that it was clearer. It was clearer for the people that come and help them manage that resource, and just so everyone knew they were doing the right thing without contravening some permit they didn't know they were supposed to have.
It's a bit of a setup, but how much red tape has actually been removed here?
Quite a bit. We've come back from 8 permits to 2, which is very welcome, and they're very straightforward permits. There's a property protection permit, which will cover just about everything in most zones if you need to manage deer, and another permit, I just can't think of the name of it right now, but it's a subsequent permit that helps as well.
So a landowner is going to be able to really respond in real time, or do I still have to go down to get my licensing and wait a few weeks and all that sort of thing? Or have we actually reduced red tape? Have we?
Well, red tape always comes with delays, Grayson. There's always a time lag, but if farmers know they've got a deer problem, they can get those permits in place reasonably quickly. The Game Management Council is pretty good at it, and so in real time, if you want a permit today, you'll probably have to wait a couple of days or a bit longer for it, but generally you'll get it when you need it.
The government talks about managing deer, and this is probably the real pinch point amongst this debate. We talk about reducing deer numbers. Are the two objectives the same thing?
In a farmer's mind, yes. Managing is reducing. There are farmers out there that like to have deer on their property, and there's a minority of landholders in Tasmania that actually encourage the sporting clubs and things and shooters on their properties, and it is a minority. I see a lot of social media, Facebook, saying that all farmers make money out of deer, and that's just not true. The vast majority see deer as a liability and a loss-causing mechanism. They're a factor that on our farms that ruin fences and eat crops and cause environmental damage. So managing deer for the majority of farmers is a reduction in numbers. For a minority, managing deer is maintaining a hunting resource, and it's their farm, they're deer that are on their property, and they're welcome to that.
Jono, do you hear much about deer eating pasture and impacting farmers from a policy perspective?
I think just pest management in general, so wallabies and deer, they sort of couple into one when you start talking to farmers, and the effects that it has on pasture growth, specifically for livestock, which area I'm in. And then when it comes to cropping, it does just as much damage. And then there's the fence issues. It rolls on. So it's good that we're having these conversations and that there is a bit of work being done in the background by government and by farmers and the public itself. So there's a long way to go, but I think we're on the right track. And if we can just keep working with it and working with farmers, more importantly, they'll have the ideas and they'll have the know-how to get there. The
other topical part of this debate, and Nathan knows this question's coming to him, is the zones in terms of eradication. Do we really need a permit system just to remove this invasive species in, say, zones 2 and 3?
Most of the red tape and the permit system is historical because the deer are partly protected species. That's historical. It's in place to maintain a sporting and hunting resource, which we know the numbers are out there. It's about 80 million a year it contributes to Tasmania's economy, and it's a part of a lot of people's lifestyle. So there are still permits required because it is still regulated. In Zone 2 and 3, the requirement for those regulations is greatly reduced given where the minister's gone. But in Zone 1, where the traditional hunting sporting resource is kept, the permits are still there to maintain that for where farmers want to utilise that as an income stream, or hunters are wanting to access it for heads and antlers and things.
Forgive my ignorance, Nathan, but does it cost money to get a permit?
Well, for our wallaby, I've never needed a deer permit, even though deer have made it to our property on the Forth River and crossed the river there. I've never paid money for a game permit for wallabies. I don't understand the costs and permits so well with deer.
I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So there will be I always like to think of topics from the opposite side. There will be people with commercial interests in deer.
Mm-hmm.
Have we considered the impact on them, and how are we having that conversation, and is government doing anything to support them through a transitionary period if it has a material impact on their business? It's okay to say no.
Look, I'm not really across that. There are commercial deer properties that are concerned about some of the things that have come up around commercialisation of wild shot deer, and that's a discussion between those guys and the minister, and we're happy to take comment from those people, and we've had comment from a lot of those producers. The other commercial interest traditionally, Michelle, has been farmers in Zone 1, which is the traditional deer habitat once they were introduced, that have sporting clubs and shooting clubs that come on and hunt deer either for meat or for trophies. And some of those farms do charge for that, and all different ways and all different amounts. We haven't had any feedback from any of those farmers. I think in Zone 1 they'll still stay as they are, and they can manage their deer as they see fit. As far as commercial deer producers go, they're making representation, and they've spoken to us about the impacts that it could have on their business and profitability and viability.
Mm-hmm. Is the policy setting right for the long term now?
I think it's heading in the right direction. I think if we can get those numbers down and take the pressure off, particularly farms in Zone 2 and 3 where deer aren't traditionally found, I think it'll stop being a headline issue.
Well, we've talked about confidence to invest, confidence to produce, the long-term confidence in this policy setting, which brings us to the long-term view of Rushy Lagoon. The saga continues. We have done a lot of work in this space, Nathan, undertaking community consultation regarding the use of taxpayer funds to purchase productive land. You'd have to say the response was pretty clear. In fact, the front page of the North East Advertiser was no social licence. 98% of respondents opposed taxpayer-funded purchase of productive land. Why did we decide to do that consultation, Nathan?
We decided to do that consultation because no one else would and no one else had done. No one else had taken the temperature of the community or the industry on whether or not the use of taxpayer funds to purchase agricultural land or to take an equity stake in productive agricultural land for land use change, whether or not that was palatable. And our consultation results were very clear that the community and industry across the state just said it wasn't palatable. To the point when I think it was Grayson emailed me the results and emailed me the graph. I had to zoom in my phone to find the people that disagreed with it. The little tiny column on the bar graph. It was such a comprehensive no to the use of taxpayers' funds for this sort of shenanigan.
And using taxpayer funds to convert that productive land into forestry. Was the same. I think it was, I'm just looking here, it's well over 95% as well. If you believe the subsidy had distorted the market, respondents, again, 89% again said they thought that the decision by the government to subsidise would distort the market. Again, that's not less than 80%.
So on that one, Grayson, the managed investment schemes are still very fresh in farmers' memories. We remember the absolute market failure and abject disaster that they were, and the graft and corruption, I think we can call it that went on at the time with investors being promised things and they never eventuated, and all kinds of other disasters. The jump in land prices that outpaced commodity pricing again, and we're going to see that again. This sort of government intervention, taking equity and providing subsidy, particularly moving into agricultural land for whatever reason, creates a market distortion, and distortion will create a failure at some point.
Directly when asked, the community was asked about turning this into plantation or remaining dairy. Again, 80 plus % said keep it in dairy. A few said a mix, but not enough to be noteworthy. I mean, these results are just actually quite staggering. I've run numerous surveys across different industries, and this is just polarised.
To touch on something Michelle said, the community understand they have to eat, and you can't eat much off a pine tree. And it's really encouraging to see that our community understand that you can't import everything, that food security, food sovereignty counts for something. They're big topics here at TasFarmers. We know that to grow our own food and to value add here and do all the right things for our community is appreciated by the community, and I think that result in itself tells us that our community wants to eat local food, and you can't milk a pine tree.
Jono, as policy man and looking at numbers regularly, do those numbers surprise you, or you think that's something that the broader community has got right?
No surprises there. I think from speaking to farmers and just the general understanding of what productive land should be used for, that those statistics don't surprise me. It's interesting when you start thinking about if you do start transitioning the land to forestry or whatever it might be, getting it back to arable productive land is really challenging, and it's a decision that once made will be hard to turn back. So I think that needs to take into some consideration into the decisions being made on farm.
So farm forestry is critically important. There's a lot of reasons why we have farm forestry. It's an alternative crop. It's useful on ground that really doesn't sustain any other sort of agriculture. But to displace good agriculture, good agricultural land with forestry is a big decision and needs to be contemplated carefully.
So we know that food security is important and producing food for our nations is really important, and we know that we produce a really great product. We also know that our agricultural products bring great value to our Tasmanian economy. So what I want to know is if that farm is going to go into pine trees, what value will that bring to the Tasmanian economy? The other thing is, for me, what happens to the people that are currently living on those farms? We know that on farms we provide housing often for farms. We've got a housing crisis. So those current houses, where are those people going to go to? Where will they be displaced to? The local communities, how big an area will be impacted by land use? What happens to our local goods and services? Will they still be able to make their own businesses, make a profit? Will local schools still be filled with children? How wide and broad? Has a study been done on that impact?
As a guess, I don't think so.
Well,
it should be.
Yeah, and look, TasFarmers this week did meet with the Liberal Party, or actually the Coalition's Regional Rural Committee. Nathan, can you tell us about what TasFarmers' key messages were taken to that meeting?
Our key message has been really consistent to whoever we've spoken to, and that is that using taxpayers' money to acquire an equity stake or to subsidise purchase of agricultural land isn't appropriate, particularly when that equity stake or subsidy artificially inflates the market price of that property. And so that's the message we took. We raised a lot of concerns with that group as to what that would do to agriculture, to viability, to the ability of farmers to reinvest when all of a sudden in that district land prices are now 30% above where they should be. And they were quite responsive to it. They were quite surprised at some of the potential impacts and that we pointed out.
And they did ask about representation. We'd told them we'd made representation to a number of bodies, including...
We have written so many letters starting well into last year, and we know that our current Ag Minister has, we believe that our Premier has, and the response we've all got has been pretty much zero. It's just been a brick wall.
And again, that was fed to the committee.
And they've had the same responses when they've asked in Canberra directly.
And so that included, say, FIRB, other issues raised around governance.
So there is a governance issue around government money, taxpayers' money being used for this sort of project. So that's a concern in and of itself. And then there was a concern raised about individuals sitting on both bodies, which could be a conflict of interest. And the group were most interested in that because obviously there needs to be extra governance controls put in if that is the case.
Gresham House is really behind a lot of this. One of the lines from the federal minister who didn't deny that taxpayers' money was involved at AgFest also said that it was really around the land classification. Michelle, how would you feel about the argument? It's had two dairies, there's three dairies, in fact, have been on the property. Would that mean that it's poor farming land if you're able to sustain three farming dairies?
If you've got three dairies there, then that's going to be prime ag land. And I think it's not just that. If you're taking milk out of the system for a processor, that's going to have a material impact on our processors too, because they need to fill their vats to be efficient in their production. So, yeah, I think that's not a good thing.
Not a good argument.
No.
And as you said, if a process is taken out, or supply to a processor, there's less trucks on the road. That impacts another business. If they're someone else is on that chain in terms of delivery and pickup, they're going to be impacted as well.
The other thing is that if you've got that market distortion in the land price, how are your local investors, and there were some that to buy that land, how are they supposed to compete? We're putting our average everyday Australians up against big corporations and we can't compete, but we've got to have a bit of nationalistic pride somewhere.
We're actually putting them up against the government.
Yeah.
If it was two local farmers bidding for it, they're just competing against each other. But when effectively taxpayers' money flows in and inflates the price, that just rubs everyone out. The process for bidding for that land just becomes distorted.
So the other thing is, my understanding is that some of those, that the dairy side of that operation probably need a little bit of investment in it to really bring it up to, to scratch. And if you're paying top dollar land price that you can barely afford, at a low milk price, how are you going to have the money to invest in those and to bring them up to world-class, dairies?
The short answer is you won't.
No.
You just can't.
And our government shouldn't be materially impacting that ability for us to do that.
Well, let's hope FIRB's looking at Gresham House where they stick their taxpayer dollars into Ireland and all the other issues around it. At the heart of the debate, it's about land ownership. We're not against foreign investment, but it's certainly the way that going about it and potentially using government money to do that, which is rather upsetting just for the average taxpayer, I must say.
On that, Grayson, we've said it before, foreign ownership is at the heart of Tasmanian agriculture. Our processors, a lot of our corporate investors, they're all foreign and they are the engine room of what we do. And we're not against farm forestry. We've got a lot of members and we promote farm forestry as being really environmentally sustainable and a thing to aspire to where it's appropriate, but to just simply displace prime agricultural ground at the expense of other local bidders on the properties, it's not palatable at all.
And when we're talking about food security as a nation and the government's coming up with a plan, it does seem counterintuitive. That's some of the things that would be keeping me up at night if I was in charge. If we're going around the table talking about things that are keeping us up at night, Michelle, what keeps you awake in the Meander Valley late at night apart from a big bright moon?
A lot of the decisions that are being made in our country around how we farm and how we can invest in businesses spin around in my head at night. But I think forefront of my mind is that on our farm, one of our goals is to provide a platform for growth for our people. Now, those people include our staff and they include our children. So we've managed to raise 3 children who were keen to come back to the farm. And yes, we lost Sophie in 2019, but the boys are coming back next year. And we're really, really proud that we've shown them a wonderful life and a wonderful business model. But I feel that some of the decisions being made in our country right at the moment are taking our own sense of agency to make decisions in our lives to invest in ourselves and our future and grow businesses and be part of something really great beyond a modern wage. That's being sorely tested. So I would like to see policy decisions being made to reflect the ability for our young people to grow and invest themselves. And I want our boys to have confidence coming home that it's the right decision. Yeah.
Well, the government is certainly struggling to communicate its narrative around capital gains and other issues that affect the transition. So some very big issues to keep you up.
Yeah, farm succession and the ability for our staff even to grow and develop their skills and be confident in their career choice and maybe at some point have skin in the game themselves, which is exactly what our country used to be all about, and that's been lost.
Yep, it's may not be a budget for our future generations after all, but we'll let the populace make that final call at the polls. Nathan Cogs. Must be still plenty keeping you awake as president of TasFarmers.
Absolutely. So something that I've become very aware of over the last couple of weeks, particularly with news around paraquat being discontinued. There's a lack of chemistry out there for certain issues that we face, certain pests we have to manage. We've lost a lot of our insecticides that we would normally use for managing corby grubs and others. And we're hearing of regions in Tasmania, farms in Tasmania, that could be losing up to 60% of productive dairy pasture simply because there's nothing to control corby grubs. It's no surprise that some of those chemicals, paraquat has health issues identified that go along with the use of paraquat, so leading to Parkinson's and other things. And some of the grub sprays were highly toxic. So it's understandable that governments and agencies want to remove those. However, the issue around this that would keep me awake is we've got nothing coming on behind them. So less toxic, less health affective chemistry that will do the same job but with less side effects. Part of that is potentially the cost of the APVMA registration. We saw that some time ago with the Alternatives to 1080 program, and there was a product called Ferritox that was identified. It's used in New Zealand. It would be quite effective on wallabies, less impacting on things like domestic dogs and native wildlife. However, the cost of APVMA registration stopped it being introduced into Tasmania or Australia as a whole. I think we need to look at that. I think if we're going to take chemicals and agronomy out of the system, we need to be promoting a way to get less toxic but just as effective products back into the market. Otherwise, we're going to see serious production declines in some areas. I mean, 60% of someone's grass on the dairy farm is going to have a huge impact on their profitability and viability.
We certainly, if we're going to ban it, we're going to need a way forward, I think is what I'm hearing there.
Absolutely.
Jono, policy is one big beast, mate. You don't sleep at all, I assume. Or if you do, what keeps you awake before you do drift off?
If you ask my lovely partner, she'll tell you I'm sleeping quite well at night. But in a more real sense, just around the work that we're doing at TasFarmers, the excitement around some of the projects and the policy development that we've got going is actually something that it doesn't really keep you up, but it just makes you keen to come into work the next day and get stuck into it. And we've got a great team here that's putting into a lot of effort with putting money back into farmers' pockets and looking for profitable ways to create a sustainable industry. And if you take a walk around this office here, you'll speak to a lot of people that are really working hard, and there's no direct exact policy or industry that we're focusing on. It's more spread around the whole Tasmanian agricultural landscape. And it's exciting to be involved in, and it's something that keeps me excited to come into work the next day.
What are the policy committees that you've been a part of, just for listeners' knowledge?
Anything livestock and a little bit of cereals and seeds.
Yep.
But working with the dairy industry, working with the red meat and wool industry, there's been a huge amount of work over the last few years to make it less of a burden for farmers to actually do their job. And we continue to do that, and there's obviously a lot of room to grow in that space. But if we continue speaking to our committees, our members, our farmers out there, we'll continue to get good feedback and work for their future and for ours as well.
Listeners, you should know Jono's also been instrumental in the animal welfare issues. You've been part of that process, Jono?
Yeah, that's another big process. We obviously had some issues a few years back, but it's been really promising for the industry to actually face it head on and understand that if there are some issues there, they need to be fixed. And I'd say that we've done a bloody good job of fixing them. And Tassie's a really proud agricultural state, and we will continue to be. So, if everyone just keeps chipping in and playing their part, then I don't think we'll run into any issues in the future.
If people do have an issue, what can they do to reach out to you, Jono?
I'd say get in touch with you, Grayson, but no, ring the office. We've got a good team here that are happy to help, and anything that's coming from the ground level is things that we need to know about. So just get in touch.
Yeah, I'm happy to play intermediary and introduce you to Jono if you reach out. Well, in closing, thank you, Michelle. It's been a pleasure to have you on. A very huge depth of knowledge is obvious. Nathan Cox, thank you again. I'm sure we'll book you in for the next episode. Any teasers on the next episode, Nathan?
At some point, we need to talk about FarmX, Grayson.
We do. FarmX is going to be huge this year. We're lining up speakers. Pre-sale tickets are up. Anything else you'd like to add there, Nathan?
If there's any businesses out there that want to sponsor FarmX and get their name on our banners and other places, talk to Grayson or Jess.
Well, with over 200 young farmers turning up last year, if you want to have your product seen, if you want to tell your story about what you've been doing on the property to innovate and change and adapt, we'd certainly love to hear from you. So thank you again to our guests. Thank you to our members. Without them, it doesn't happen. Thank you to our listeners, Neil, Nathan, and perhaps a big shout out to Ian, who I'm sure is listening. Thank you to Telstra, our sponsors, TasBuilt and The Hub, and Elders, who are working with us closely on FarmX. We'll see you on the next episode. Deary me. Talk soon. Bye.